The Yamada family, as we've been talking about, is very interesting. As they achieve unification, they take as their symbol the most powerful object they can see in our universe. And that happens to be the sun. So that's why you see the Japanese flag, the Empire of the Rising Sun, the white background with the sun on it. It's the ancient Yamato symbol of power. Very interestingly, the islands of Japan are a very patriarchal, male-driven society, yet they chose as their symbol the sun as a goddess, as a female god, and the emperors were her living representations, her living family members on the earth. And what makes the Yamato family so special in world history is they're the world's oldest single ruling family. That means the current emperor of Japan is still a Yamato. Now, he is more of a chief of state. He does not have a whole lot of political power, but is the only single unbroken line of dynastic power in the world. The Yamato family has been in power for over 2,000 years. A couple years ago, the emperor was going to have a baby, and the world was hoping that it would be a girl to see what would happen, to see if Japan would have her first empress. But the emperor had a boy. On September 2nd, 1945, General Douglas MacArthur made Emperor Hirohito on board the USS Missouri proclaim that he was not a living god, he was just a man like his people. So it wasn't until modern history that the idea that the emperor is not a divine being has ended. And so just like any dynasty, just like Caligula and Nero in Rome, there has always been a Yamato emperor on the throne. Sometimes he was nothing more than just a figurehead, someone high up in a palace tower doing whatever, while assistants ran the show. But even with these weak kings, the Yamato family was never usurped. Again, people thought that they were divine. There were a few assassination attempts throughout history. There was always a Yamato on the throne. Another one of the things that are deeply ingrained in Japanese society is the idea and the thought, the code of honor. Honor means everything. So when you pledge your word or your loyalty, you have to buy into that. You cannot break your word. It causes you to lose what is called face, to lose honor. And in Japan, that just does not happen. It's unacceptable. The religion practiced by early Japan was known as Shintoism. Like all the other early cultures we have talked about, Japan started as, polytheistic. They worshipped the forces of nature, God of the sun, God of the wind, God of the rain. And Shinto, translated, means way of the gods. And so many powerful Japanese families chose a powerful symbol of nature to represent their family. It might be a big mountain, maybe a neat waterfall, or a interestingly shaped tree, or a boulder. It was something, unusual, like, Niagara Falls. One of the families chooses Mount Fuji, the tall volcanic mountain in Japan, the Fujiwara family. That becomes their symbol. And the larger and more powerful your object, the larger, more powerful, and more clout your family had. If you're a big timer, like the Fujiwaras, you have Mount Fuji. And so this sensitivity to nature will permeate Japanese art and literature. It's very interconnected, Japanese culture, lifestyle, with that of nature. And when it comes to extended family, the Japanese believe in what is known as the we, the UJI, or the clan. Shintoism and the family are very, very important. As I said, each clan or each we had its own myth that centered on the creation of a force of nature. It was the family's original ancestor. And like the Yamatos, this is very key when proclaiming political authority inside of Japan. The larger and more powerful your force of nature, this will set you apart and ahead and above of everyone else except the Yamatos. Shintoism was also important because of the location of Japan. Maybe I'm going too fast. This is kind of awkward, so I'm just going to be like, Harrison, be quiet. Jack, pay attention. Dayton, let's not talk to Jack or Adam. For the love of God, 5th period, pay attention to me. I don't know who I'm going to yell at in 5th period. Who should I yell at? Cool kids, Will, Lonigan, Rossman, focus. Let's go. Let's pay attention. All right, now I feel better. Shintoism, by being part of an archipelago, the Japanese were isolated from much of the world for long periods of their history. And by choosing something powerful, whether it being the sun or Mount Fuji, this family's political clout can last for over thousands of years. The Yamatos with the sun shows that how selection of a powerful natural figure can help you out politically in the long run. And so this is where, again, Japan will have a special relationship with China and Korea. As geographically Japan is separated off the coastal, the continental part of Asia out into the Pacific Ocean, they will experience very little cultural diffusion. And by 600 AD, right when Western Europe is devolving into the Dark Ages, some Japanese students will go abroad. Most of the time, these students are aristocratic young men who will be sent out from Japan to go get a first-hand look at what is happening in Korea and in China. What's happening there? Let's learn about it firsthand. And then they come back and they study everything from art and architecture to language to science to technology. When they return, they lay it all out on the table and they study it and they look at it. And these aristocratic young men who went abroad will come back and take roles in the government so they can share their knowledge with not only the Yamato family, but everybody else in Japan as well. And these men bring back the knowledge of technology, legal ideas. And the main thing they focus on is the new Chinese dynasty, the Tang dynasty, what their government did. And they explain how things worked in China to the Yamato family and the emperor. So this is a very important piece of cultural diffusion that becomes very important in Japanese history. Again, most of this will take place during the Tang and the Song dynasty eras of China. We're going to talk about them next. And here the Japanese would have to figure out whether or not they would adopt portions of higher Chinese civilization. What can they use? They were kind of overwhelmed by it all. There's just too much coming at me. And so these Japanese students who went abroad thought about what specific type of institutions they should adopt. And the Yamatos had to figure out if they should adopt them and how to modify them or make them fit better for Japan. Some things just wouldn't translate. And Japan is famous throughout its history for adopting ideas from other people and making them fit better for Japan. Again, let's take the Ford automobile. We're going to turn it into a Civic, an Accord, or an Odyssey. We're going to make it fit better. Problem with this is some parts of Chinese philosophy did not translate into Japanese. Some things just didn't work. And so Japan will experience some growing pains. It was hard for the Yamato court, the Yamato emperor and his staff, to understand some Chinese philosophy and how to make it mesh. One of the things the Yamatos will quickly adopt is borrowing from the Tang Dynasty government. And the idea is to give loyal supporters an honored rank and an honored title. I'll make you a lord, a duke, a count. You will have land, you will have title, you have power, and you will have prestige. And the other thing the Japanese take from the Chinese is the idea of surveying land and taking a census. They looked at what farmland was the most productive, who was growing the most food, and what areas was that really lacking. They looked at areas where there were large concentration of people. If you are consuming more resources, just like in China and Rome, then you got to pay more taxes. If you're a farm area that has a really good yield, really good crops, you should pay more where then they can just barely get anything growing out of the ground. In this way, it makes tax distribution more fair, but it also helps if there's a flood or a famine or a disaster and an agricultural region is suffering, you can give them a break for a few years. But it requires a lot of maintenance and upkeep on these records. And while the Japanese loved many Chinese ideas and inventions, they decided they couldn't look at everything, so they took what they needed to fill an immediate and specific Japanese need. It's not a want, it's a need. We can't look at everything. What must we have right now? And this will usher in a period of Japanese history known as Nara, Japan, N-A-R-A. Nara is a city where the new capital will be built. In 710 AD, the city of Nara is created, and it was a carbon copy of the Chinese capital, a miniaturized version of what they were doing in China. And so while villagers were living in thatched roof huts, the emperor and his court, his staff, were living in nice, beautiful pagoda-styled architecture with lush gardens and much beauty surrounding them. Nara was a brand spanking modern new Japanese city. However, the royal officials in Nara had a lot more power than their Confucian scholar contemporaries in China. In Japan, the advisors had more influence. Every aristocrat in Nara, every guy who knew somebody got an important governmental job. There was no civil service test. In China, you had to take your test and have somebody recommend you. It was more what you know than who you knew. In Japan, it's the opposite. Who you know gets the job. All right? Your dad's boss is going to take care of his buddy's son. All right? That's just how it works. And so, with every aristocrat having a job and no external enemies, the Japanese government gets very bloated. It becomes inefficient. But there's no external enemies. Let's let the local clans handle tiny little minute problems, and we're just going to govern a national scale, and we're going to live well. Now in China, right, there was the civil service exam. Everyone in China knew governmental workers deserved to be in power because of their studying and their grade. But in Japan, again, its family ties are more important than grades. All Japanese aristocrats were educated. But it was the social status of the family and the ties the family had with other rich nobles that were the most important. Jobs aren't based on merit, they're based on family. And so, the Japanese will keep this policy of selective borrowing until about 839, right after the end of the reign of Charlemagne in Europe. The Japanese will send their last delegation to China. It returns, and Japan decides that they have taken everything that they can from China. And they're going to spend the next 350 years, all the way to the High Middle Ages, transforming, all the Chinese information they took into higher Japanese culture. It's going to take 350 years. They're going to do it slowly, and they're going to do it incrementally. And this brings about a new era of Japanese history known as Heian Japan. It's the next capital. The Heian period will last from 794 to 1185 AD. And a new capital was built in the city of Heian, which is present-day Kyoto. During this time, Japan experienced many problems with the rules and ideas they borrowed from China. Some things just don't work. That census that they took required a great deal of constant attention. And China had a system known as land and taxes. The land and taxes system was very complex and required a lot of boundaries to be redrawn. The way it worked is, some people will get farms and houses for 6 years. After 6 years, you will be moved out of that house and a new family will be put in. While you're living in the government house and farming for those 6 years, you have to pay taxes. So the first 2 years you live on the farm, you're really good, you bust your tail, you keep the house clean, you mow the grass, you paint it, you fix the screen porch. But by the time you get to the 3rd and 4th year, you're so tired from working hard, you know, why keep up the house? In 2 years, I'm just going to have to move out anyway. There was no incentive because you didn't own anything and you were paying the taxes. Then you're out in the street or finding a new job and somebody else moves in. It just doesn't work. Also at this time, taxes were to be paid in foodstuffs. Right? What you grew, what you made, what fish you caught if you were a fisherman. To make this system work, the Chinese government redistributed land every 6 years to ensure everyone had land and could pay. It was a constant redrawing of land boundary. It took a lot of time, energy, and money. Well, unfortunately, in Japan, owning land became hereditary. You passed it on to your children. It was no longer redistributed. So the poor people had no way to ever increase the amount of land that they owned. And so this land and taxes system will collapse during the Heian dynasty. It just doesn't work. And the Japanese say, okay, we're faced with a problem. What are we going to do? And the Japanese come up with a new taxation system on their own. The new taxation was converted to a payment system that will create what is known as Japanese feudalism, where you pay taxes with foodstuffs or monetary payment, cash money. It was very hard for large landowners and the poor people. They simply couldn't do it. Or small landowners and the poor people. So it was the rich, powerful nobles will create what is known as a free estate or a manor. Here is my farm. I'm a big, wealthy person. Free, independent farmers would give their land to me. Karina would give me her land. Iris would give me her land, and Olivia would give me her land. They would give me their land as a form of payment, and they could live there. I would look after them and make sure they didn't have to pay taxes. They give their land and their freedom to me in return. They work for me, but they don't have to pay taxes. I'm an already rich landowner. I've got plenty of means to pay their taxes. I've just now gobbled up more land and more farms and have become more wealthy. It's the exact same thing that Kami Colin did to Khalil's bakery. It was cheaper to live as a peasant serf on a large manor than pay taxes. The rich become richer and the poor become poorer. And this will usher in Japanese feudal system. Feudalism is a type of government used in the Middle Ages in Europe, China, and Japan. Japanese feudalism is a carbon copy, a mirror image of the same system that existed in Europe between the 7th and the 11th centuries, the 600s to the 1000s. There were some few small changes in rank and in title. On the top of the pyramid was the emperor. He has the highest rank in society. Everybody answers to him. Even if the emperor was just a figurehead, he is sitting on top. And at this time, during the Heian period, the emperor will give executive ruling authority to his second in command. This second in command will become known as the Shogun. It's what Ryan does when he wears his sleeveless tank tops to class. He is a Shogun. Good one, Ryan. The Shogun is the chief military officer who serves as the actual ruler. The emperor is a figurehead. The shogun is going to make all the decisions. Third aspect of feudalism, the shogun will work with a large landowner known as a daimyo. Hey, can I borrow a daimyo? Okay, that's my bad joke of the day. A daimyo is like an upper lord, a knight in Europe. He is a rich guy that owns a lot of land. And the daimyo has a lot of personal soldiers called samurai. So you have emperor, shogun, daimyo, samurai. In Europe, the equivalent is European king, upper lord, knight. Samurai are knights. These samurai were loyal to their daimyos. And they clearly understood that they served underneath the emperor. The emperor was everything. The emperor and then the shogun. Now, in Japan, peasants represented the remaining 75% of the population. Few people were aristocrats, were daimyos or samurai. Everyone from skilled artisans to merchants and peasants were part of that class. And this is how Japan will be governed from 790 to about the year 1200, right about the end of the High Middle Ages, beginning of the Renaissance. In the Heian dynasty, the army will change from a system of mandatory service where every young man had to serve in the military to one of a professional long-term cavalry made up of official government troops, troops paid for by the emperor. In return for serving in the army for many years of service, these soldiers did not have to pay taxes. So you trade, you become a soldier for a long time in return for not paying taxes. The word samurai translated means one who serves. I am going to serve you so I don't have to pay taxes. Now, much like knights in Europe, it cost a lot of money to be a samurai. Samurai had to own his own horse. He had to be able to buy or make his own weapons and armor, as well as train for long periods of time. The Japanese samurai sword was incredibly deadly. In Europe, medieval knights banged on each other, and the idea was to knock a knight off his feet. When he's in his armor, he's like a turtle flipped over on its back. You didn't want to kill him, you wanted to ransom him. Get money. In Japan, the samurai sword is so sharp and deadly, 33% of the time both combatants were wounded or killed. However, by 900, samurai training pays off for the Heian dynasty. Small military armies began to be created throughout the wilds of Japan. Again, it's proximity to authority. If I'm over here, right, talking to Greta and Bryn, then you know over here, Haley and Corpus are going to talk about something. When I come over here, Haley and Corpus are quiet, and Greta and Bryn start talking. It happens all the time. It's proximity to authority. Where the emperor is, people far away are going to do what they want to do. Whenever a regional governor did not like the tax amount he was given, he simply refused to pay. What are you going to do, emperor? Come out here and make me? And so the emperor would have to send samurais to control these rebellions. Here's the catch. If I'm a divine emperor, and Alec refuses to pay taxes, I send some samurai out. What had my guys better do? Excellent. You're right, Will. We've got to hammer Alec. We can't go out there and barely win. It can't be a lot. We've got to just hammer Alec into the ground. I'm the emperor. My troops have to be the best, swiftly and brutally put down rebellions. And so, by the late Heian period, the elaborate Japanese governmental bureaucracy, ideas that were brought from China to Japan were just simply not working. Governmental functions were too bloated. Nothing got done. So the Shogun at the time is going to scale down the Japanese government to 3 main offices, 3 main departments. I can't meet with everybody, but I can talk to 3 people. First of these governmental ministries, number 1, were auditors, accountants. All right? What we began to do is we're going to rotate our governors periodically. Right? Gabby is going to move from here, over to Isaac's kingdom. And Isaac is going to move over here to the back. Right? He is going to rotate. He is going to take over for, let's say, Harry Jones. Harry is going to come over and take Gabby's spot. As they rotate, Gabby, Harry, and Isaac are supposed to audit their predecessor. How did they do? Does the amount of money that they brought in match that of their tax records, or were they skimming off the top? This is a way to check accountability. Second governmental department were known as the archivists. These guys simply wrote down and processed all the laws. They were also, their job was to execute or carry out the laws. They carried out the emperor or the shogun's wishes. Number 3 were simply police commissioners. These were the samurai. Their job was to enforce laws and make sure there's law and order. And the police officers become military officers as well. All 3 departments were controlled by the emperor. They were his court. An emperor's court is his staff. They are his assistants and advisors. And we'll end the day with the famous Fujiwara family. Oh boy, we have so much to do. But we should be able to, crush it when I get back. Fujiwara family in feudal Japan are one of the most powerful families in the emperor's capital. And they were able to exert influence over some weak emperors. Fujiwara family knew they could never become the emperor. They could never be a Yamato. But for well over 100 years, they're dominant advisors in the emperor's court because they had their daughters, Fujiwara daughters, marry Yamato sons. They were very good at arranging marriages. So they married into the royal family. In this way, they could gain a stranglehold on all the upper level governmental positions. Now, eventually, there will be a young emperor, a guy named Shirakawa, who's very similar to Augustus Caesar. He decides that he should be in control, and he reasserts his power, and he demotes the Fujiwaras. Shirakawa's had enough. And this is going to bring us to talk about some cultural achievements. Chinese influence can be seen in Japanese literature, especially their poetry, which once again always shows that strong, deep connection to nature. However, Japan didn't have its own writing system, and so it borrowed the Chinese characters. Problem is, the Japanese spoken language has a lot of words and expressions that could not be expressed in Chinese writing, in Chinese characters. They couldn't be, these thoughts and sayings couldn't be written down because there's no way to write them in Chinese. And this is tough. In 951, there was an empress. Her name was Amida. And she wanted to read and write poems in her own language. And she couldn't. So she called her court scholars together and says, guys, I want a Japanese-only writing system. I want to be able to write in my own language. So mojo me up a written language. Now that's got to be one of the most difficult things to do. Like, how do you create a written language? Where do you even start? It's funny that I think like the University of Michigan, actually you can get a foreign language credit for taking Klingon. the language of Star Trek, you know, Zhajuk and Klanach and, you know, all that, you know, good stuff. How do you write down a language from something that most of you guys can't even write your own names? But they do it, and it's called the kana or the kana. It is the Japanese written language. This allows the most important cultural flowering of the Heian dynasty. I don't know how long that's been. You guys are probably pretty tired. If you need to rewind anything, I will pick up right here with Japanese literature and medicine, and I'll tell you a Shirakawa story when we get back if you guys can remind me. Have a good day. I'll see you guys soon.